Good morning, Scott here, known as Cantaloupe to some online, and I'm bringing a video to you that's on a subject that's interesting to me. It might be of interest to you or someone you know, and that is formulas in movies, cinema, American cinema in particular, which I am a huge fan of and always have been. I think that movies are very difficult to make well. I think that people have the wrong idea about what goes into a good movie. Budget helps, absolutely it helps, but it's not even necessarily a requirement. I've seen tons of great low budget films in my life, and I want to talk about formulas because they're in the circles of discussing cinema. There's some differing ideas about formulas and the ones that we've used in different eras, like in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, because there seems to be kind of a center of, I don't know, a tone, if you will, contemporary to those times, those time periods, where certain themes are repeated in movies and TV shows also, and kind of the whole entertainment industry somehow. I don't really know how all that's coordinated, but it's apparently coordinated. But movies in particular, in the 80s, I'll just kind of start there, had, if you recall, if you saw a lot of those movies, there was a prevailing theme of romance. There was, it was on the heels of the 70s, obviously, which was on the heels of the 60s. And in the 70s, you saw, I want to get back to the 80s, but to precede that, there was the free love movement. There was, the hippies and revolutionary attitudes, a lot of, strife and reconciliation surrounding the Vietnam War, and a huge civil rights movement. There's a lot of stuff going on, but it all had kind of a theme of humanity to it. Natural, kind of organic humanity, and this was reflected in the cinema in the late 70s and early 80s. It was ripe for attitudes of love and fellowship of man, and of course there were still dystopian themes. Those are probably always going to be in there somewhere, but there was a lot of romance, for lack of a better word, in the movies, more so I think than nowadays, and that's kind of the point. In the 90s, it became a little bit sarcastic. It was, if I'm just saying, like an overall kind of bird's eye view of the zeitgeist is the word. Actually, it's the spirit of a period of creative works, is my understanding of the meaning of the word. But in the 90s, things became a little bit sarcastic. The humor got a little bit drier. The overall adhesion to themes of romance and love without any kind of shame or excuses or apologies became less frequent. It became less frequent, I think. In the 90s, there were a lot more comedies, romantic comedies, rom-coms as they're called, but you didn't just see action movies with love as kind of the central focus, with the arc of the boy meets girl. And this is the formula. I'm getting back to the main subject of this video, is the formula of boy meets girl. They have a challenge or a conflict, or they are against the world, and there's only a handful of these formulas. And then there has been, in the 80s especially, reconciliation towards the end, boy gets girl or whatever. But I want to talk about the reasons for these formulas, why they are recurring, why they have been all throughout history, not just in movies, but in literature, in classic literature especially. You can many times boil stories down, like Romeo and Juliet, for example, very classic, to one of a small handful of formulas. So I kind of look at, not all movies fit into a formula, first of all. Not all movies are formulaic, obviously, but there is a small number of recurring themes that have always been crowd pleasers. And that's the point. My point is that they're crowd pleasers, and they become themes because they're crowd pleasers. So a lot of people, I've heard people complain about formulaic themes, and they say, oh, that's stale, it's just the same old thing. It's like, well, maybe not. Maybe there was some subtlety that wasn't perceived by this person who was commenting, or maybe it was a variation on that theme. But I think the reason that these formulas became kind of a pattern or an official, go-to toolbox for movie makers is because these are some very predictable, instinctive, and appealing ideas that people will always enjoy because they reflect and resonate with their personal lives in many ways. And when those formulas are changed, first of all, the movies suffer in the box office. This is pretty clear by the numbers. If you look at the numbers, the 90s had a great deal of cinematic patronage, for lack of a better word, but people loved the movies. And I mean, the best movies of all time, if you ask me, came out in the 90s. But there was that migration away from some of the softer themes, some of the more human themes. And then in the 2000s, it became downright cringy to make a movie that was, it was segregated is what happened. So you still had romances in the 2000s, obviously, but they were categorized and separated from the rest of the mainstream stuff. If you liked romance movies, you were a Hallmark person or whatever. I mean, you got labels stuck to you. The movies had labels on them. It wasn't just every movie had romance in it. It was a whole category, and it was cringy. It was made to look cringy, and people described it as being that way, in other words. So anyway, it has remained kind of a much less involved subject. Romance is less, I think, prominent in modern cinema, and the themes that I'm describing are not all romantic, but they are, like I said, they resonate with people because they are common human situations that we can all identify with. And when you make a movie with that framework, with a proven and interesting framework, it does not have to be derivative, it does not have to be predictable, it does not have to be terrible. It can actually be done very, very well. And I'm kind of contesting the complaint that a movie that abides by one of these traditional formulas is going to be bad because it's formulaic. It may be formulaic, but if it's bad, it was made badly, if you ask me. There's a great number of movies that have explored these formulas, and there's no limit. So what I'm trying to say, I'll wrap up this video. I'm at 8 minutes. There's no limit to how many true historical stories that you could recall, or fictional stories that you could create upon a framework. The variations are virtually limitless. And if the movie is bad, I would hesitate to blame the framework or the formula, but the imagination and the capabilities of the director and the writers and the actors. It's a group effort, obviously. Anyway, I've gone on and on. So if you have questions or comments, I love talking about movies, and I may link something in the description. Have a great day. Reach out with questions or comments to whitehotrobot@gmail.com. Thank you.